The day I found out about my husband's affair wasn't the day my marriage ended. The day it truly died was when I saw his mistress moving boxers into our guest house, smiling while I paid for the electricity that would keep her comfortable. That line still stings every time it crosses my mind. You think betrayal is loud, screaming, broken plates, slammed doors, but mine came in quiet moments. The hum of the dishwasher, the sound of a text notification that wasn't mine, the smell of his cologne when he wasn't supposed to be home. My name is Lena. For 14 years, I thought I was happily married to a man named Daniel. He was the kind of husband people envied, charming, successful, good with words. He had that smile that could disarm anyone, including me. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a brick house with white shutters and a small guest cottage we'd inherited from his parents. That guest house was where Daniel used to keep his writing desk, a hobby he claimed helped him clear his head after long days at work. I worked as a freelance accountant from home, managing numbers for small businesses. My days were simple: breakfast by 7, coffee by 8, invoices by 9, the kind of routine that gives you comfort because it feels predictable, safe. I used to hum to myself while folding laundry, planning dinner, waiting for him to come home. I loved our life because I believed it was built on mutual respect. Daniel and I weren't perfect. We argued about money, about his long hours, about how distracted he'd become lately, but I chalked it up to stress. Everyone told me marriage had its seasons, sometimes warm, sometimes cold. I just didn't realize how cold ours had become. The first time I noticed something off, it was so small, I almost brushed it aside. Daniel came home smelling like jasmine perfume, a scent I didn't own. When I asked about it, he laughed, called me cute, and said one of his clients had hugged him goodbye after a meeting. I remember forcing a smile, convincing myself it wasn't worth an argument. Then came the late nights, the phone always face down, the sudden gym membership, the new haircut, the jokes that landed a little too harshly, the distance that started to feel like a wall. I remember sitting across from him at dinner one night, grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, candlelight, because I was trying to rekindle something that felt lost. He scrolled on his phone between bites, barely looking up. "You're distracted," I said gently. He didn't even glance up. "You worry too much, Lena. You always have." That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake listening to the rhythm of his breathing. It sounded calm, steady, like someone with nothing on his conscience. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I was becoming paranoid or if my instincts were trying to protect me. Our home had always been a sanctuary, but slowly, it began to feel like a stage. Every corner whispered something I couldn't quite name. He started locking his study, the one attached to the guest house, claimed it was because he had private documents for work. I believed him. I shouldn't have. Then one afternoon, while I was reorganizing the pantry, a small detail made my stomach drop. 2 wine glasses missing from the set of 6. Daniel didn't drink wine. I did, but only when I wasn't alone. When I asked him about it later, he said he'd broken them while working late. "You know me, clumsy as ever," he said, chuckling. I remember nodding slowly, pretending to accept it. But the next morning, I found a lipstick stain, a shade of deep red, on one of our kitchen towels. I don't wear lipstick to clean. That's when I started keeping a mental log. The days he came home late, the calls he stepped outside to take, the perfume that wasn't mine. It wasn't about catching him. It was about preserving my sanity. I needed to know if I was imagining the distance or if it was real. A few weeks later, I got my answer in the most mundane way possible, through an email. It was a bill from the utility company, one addressed to both of us. I almost deleted it, but something made me scroll. At the bottom, I noticed a new meter reading listed under secondary property, our guest house. The reading was unusually high, almost 3 times the normal usage, and Daniel hadn't been working out there for months. I called the utility office, thinking it must be a mistake. The woman on the other end confirmed it wasn't. "It looks like someone's been using it regularly, ma'am. Lights, heating, everything." I hung up, my hands trembling. That was the moment my denial cracked. Something or someone was in that house, that evening. When Daniel came home, I asked him straight out, "Have you been using the guest house again?" He froze for half a second, then smiled that practiced smile I used to love. "Just storing some stuff." "Why?" "Because the utilities spiked, like someone's living there." He laughed, too easily. "You think I'm hiding a person out there, Lena?" I wanted to believe him, but when someone lies with such ease, it does something to you. It dulls your ability to trust even your own instincts. After he went to bed, I slipped outside. The night was cold, the grass damp under my slippers. The guest house stood at the edge of the yard, its porch light off. I hesitated before unlocking the door. Inside, it smelled faintly of floral shampoo and takeout food. There were blankets on the couch, an empty wine glass on the counter, and a pair of earrings gold hoops. Not mine, resting on the desk. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. I left everything untouched and walked back to the house in silence. Daniel was asleep, his arms sprawled across my pillow as if nothing had changed, but everything had, that night. I decided I wouldn't confront him yet, not until I had proof he couldn't twist thought. So I took a deep breath, whispered a promise to myself, and began quietly documenting everything: dates, bills, photos, because something told me that my husband's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was about to become public. The following week, I moved through the house like a ghost. Everything looked the same. The kitchen counters spotless, the clock ticking in rhythm, the faint hum of the refrigerator, but I couldn't unsee what I'd found in the guest house. Daniel carried on, as though nothing had changed. He'd kiss me on the cheek in the morning, head out to work, and come back smelling faintly of someone else's perfume. Sometimes I'd hear a faint laugh from the backyard when he claimed to be mowing the lawn or taking a work call. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I started watching. The next day, when he left for work, I slipped outside again. The air was sharp with the smell of rain. I crept to the guest house, heart pounding in my throat. I peeked through the window, and there she was, a woman, maybe in her late 20s, moving around like she belonged there. Long dark hair tied up messily, a robe that wasn't hers. She was humming my song, the one I used to hum when cooking. My hands went numb. She didn't notice me watching. On the small table, I saw 2 coffee mugs, a vase of fresh lilies, and Daniel's favorite blue sweater hanging over a chair. It was intimate, domestic, like they were playing house in my own backyard. I stepped back, forcing myself to breathe. My mind was buzzing with disbelief and anger, but above all, humiliation, the kind of humiliation that burns quietly under your skin. That night, I didn't confront him. I needed time and evidence, so I called my friend Marcia, who worked in legal services. "Marcia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what happens if a husband starts using marital property without consent?" There was a pause. "Depends on how he's using it." "Lena, what's going on?" "Hypothetically," I repeated, "if he moved someone into our guest house." I heard her exhale. "That's not hypothetical, is it?" I swallowed hard. "No," she sighed. "Start documenting everything. Take photos, note dates, bills, any shared accounts. If this gets messy, proof will protect you." So I did. Every receipt, every bill that came under my name, every sign of that woman's presence, I kept it all. Days turned into weeks. I went through the motions, smiling when I had to, pretending to be fine when friends asked about us. Daniel, emboldened by my silence, grew careless. He began parking his car by the guest house instead of the main driveway. He'd stay there late, claiming he was writing again. One Saturday afternoon, I finally decided to face what I already knew. I told him I wanted to clean the guest house, spring cleaning, I said. He hesitated, but eventually shrugged. "Sure, if you want," he said, his tone dismissive. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first, a sweet mix of perfume and candle wax. Her clothes were folded neatly in the drawers, makeup brushes on the counter, and, on the nightstand, a framed photo of Daniel and her at some beach resort, his arm around her waist, both smiling like they were the ones married. Something inside me snapped. I felt tears sting my eyes, but anger held them back. I took pictures, every detail, the framed photo, the toothbrushes, even the grocery receipt from the local store where he'd bought her favorite wine. When Daniel returned that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen. He walked in, humming, and stopped when he saw me. "You look serious," he said, setting his keys down. I held up the photo. "Care to explain this?" His face changed, first shock, then annoyance. "You went through my things." "Your things," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "That's my house, Daniel, my utilities, my money paying for your affair." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Lena, you're overreacting. Overreacting." My voice trembled. "You moved your mistress into our property." He looked at me then, calm but cold. "It's not that simple. You've been difficult lately. I needed space. She just needed a place to stay for a while. Don't you dare insult me with that lie." He stepped closer, his voice low, controlled. "You could make this ugly, or you could let me handle it quietly. Don't ruin both our reputations." That's when I realized he wasn't ashamed. He was strategic. He didn't see his actions as betrayal. He saw them as power. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the faint light glowing from the guest house, knowing he was there with her, and I promised myself that if he wanted a battle of reputation, I'd give him one, but by the rules of dignity and truth. The next morning, I met with Marcia. We drafted a quiet separation plan. I started transferring part of my earnings to a new account, keeping things discreet. I wasn't going to beg or scream. I was going to prepare. Meanwhile, Daniel's behavior grew bolder. He started inviting friends over, pretending everything was normal. Even hosted a barbecue, laughing as that woman peeked out from the guest house window, pretending to be a tenant. The humiliation of it nearly broke me, but instead, it hardened me. During that barbecue, as he bragged about his business expansions, I smiled politely and excused myself to the kitchen. My hands shook as I texted Marcia one sentence: "It's time," because that night, I was done being silent. That night, I sat in the dark with my phone glowing faintly in my hand. Outside, laughter drifted from the guest house, her laugh, high and carefree, followed by Daniel's deeper tone. I remember thinking how surreal it felt to be a stranger in my own marriage. Marcia had already sent over the documents, preliminary filings, a list of financial disclosures I'd need, and notes on how to protect myself legally. I read them again and again, steadying my breath between lines. I wasn't planning to explode. I wanted precision, dignity, the kind of justice that speaks without shouting. The next morning, Daniel was cheerful, almost glowing. He poured himself coffee, humming as though he hadn't destroyed the life we built. "You're up early," he said casually. "I've got some work to catch up on," I replied, keeping my tone even. He leaned on the counter. "You've been quiet lately. I hope you're not still sulking about that misunderstanding." I almost laughed at the word misunderstanding. Instead, I said softly, "No, Daniel, I'm not sulking. I'm preparing." He frowned, probably unsure what that meant. I left it there and went to my office, the small spare room with my desk and files neatly stacked. But that day, I didn't open my accounting software. I started building my case. Every transaction, every shared bill, every unexplained expense, I logged it all. His business dinners, his fuel costs, the monthly grocery spikes. I created a timeline of his deceit, and the more I uncovered, the clearer the pattern became. He wasn't just cheating emotionally. He was manipulating our shared finances to sustain her electric bills, streaming subscriptions, even a new water heater installed in the guest house, all under my name. He had turned my trust into a funding source for his betrayal. That evening, when he went out to meet a client, I drove to the local cafe near his supposed office. I parked a few blocks away and watched from the car. Within minutes, I saw him stepping out of his vehicle, holding her hand, guiding her through the cafe door like they were newlyweds. The sight was almost cinematic. Him pulling out her chair, her smiling up at him, his fingers brushing hers across the table. I felt something inside me go completely still. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, clear understanding that love could be corrupted by comfort and convenience. I took photos quietly from my car, my hands steady this time. When they left, I followed at a distance. He didn't notice. He never thought I'd follow. He believed I'd stay home. Wounded and obedient, they drove back to my house, to the guest cottage where she now lived like a queen on my bills. I watched from down the street as he carried her bags inside, then turned off his phone. That was all I needed. Proof, not just of his affair, but of his audacity. 2 days later, I filed a formal complaint for misuse of marital property. Quietly, efficiently. Marcia helped ensure everything was airtight. When the court notice arrived, Daniel was livid. He stormed into my office, his face flushed with anger. "What is this?" he shouted, slamming the papers onto my desk. I looked up calmly. "It's a property claim. You've been using the guest house without my consent." He barked out a laugh. "You're suing your own husband." "I'm holding you accountable," I corrected. "You can't move someone into shared property and make me pay for it." He glared at me, his voice sharp. "You're embarrassing yourself, Lena. Do you know what people will say when they find out? Maybe they'll say, 'I finally stopped letting you treat me like a doormat.'" His jaw tightened. "You think this will end well for you? You'll lose everything. I'll make sure of it." I stood up, my heart hammering but my voice calm. "No, Daniel, you already took everything. Now I'm just taking it back." He stared at me for a long moment like he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. Then he turned and left, slamming the door behind him so hard the picture frames rattled. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house became unbearable. He'd avoid me, sometimes sleeping in the guest house, sometimes not coming home at all. When he did, his words were colder, sharper, but he never apologized. He thought this was a game of endurance, and that I'd eventually break. But instead of breaking, I started winning quietly. Neighbors began noticing. The woman's presence wasn't exactly subtle. Her car parked in our driveway, her laughter echoing late into the night. Whispers started spreading at the grocery store, at the community center, even among his own colleagues. And the more the truth surfaced, the less control he had. One afternoon, I got a call from his boss, a man I barely knew but who spoke with a careful tone. "Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to verify something. There's been talk that Daniel might be living with someone other than his spouse at the same residence. Is that true?" I paused. "You should ask him that directly, sir." There was silence. Then the man sighed. "Thank you for your honesty." That was the moment Daniel's pristine public image began to crumble. A few nights later, he came home furious. "You're poisoning people against me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the kitchen. I haven't said a word. I said quietly, chopping vegetables at the counter. "You did that all by yourself." He grabbed the counter edge, leaning close. "You think you're righteous. You think anyone's on your side, they'll call you bitter." I met his gaze. "Let them. Bitterness fades. Integrity doesn't." He stared at me for a long time, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Then he stormed out again, slamming the door so hard it shook the window panes. I stood there in silence, my hands trembling slightly over the cutting board, and for the first time, I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He had taken my love and turned it into leverage, but by exposing the truth, I'd taken his control and turned it into accountability. The court date was set, the documents were filed, the gossip had started to circle him like vultures, and yet, part of me still ached, not for him, but for the version of myself who believed marriage was a safe place. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The guest house was dark now. She was gone, maybe temporarily, maybe for good. Daniel hadn't said a word about it, but I knew this wasn't over yet. His pride wouldn't let him walk away quietly, and mine wouldn't let me back down. A week after the last argument, the sky opened up with rain, the kind that drenches everything, like the earth trying to cleanse itself. I stood by the living room window, watching water stream down the glass, when Daniel's car pulled up. He stepped out with an umbrella, his suit damp at the shoulders, his expression grim. Behind him, I noticed the passenger seat empty this time. No trace of her perfume, no laughter, just Daniel, looking smaller somehow. He came inside, shaking off his umbrella, avoiding my eyes. "She left," he said finally, setting his keys down on the counter. I didn't respond. He ran a hand through his hair. "She said she couldn't handle the attention, that people were talking, that she didn't sign up for this." The words hung there, fragile and hollow. I looked at him, for the first time in days. "You mean she didn't sign up to be the villain in a story you wrote?" He glared at me, defensive. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Daniel, I don't enjoy watching people ruin themselves, but I won't clean up your mess anymore." He sighed heavily, sinking onto the couch. The man who once strutted through life with arrogance now sat hunched, staring at the floor like he couldn't find his footing. "You told everyone," he muttered. "I didn't have to." He looked up, confusion flickering across his face. "People see," I continued. "They see the truth, eventually. You paraded her around, Daniel. You didn't hide. You wanted to be admired for your control, your charm, your audacity. But people notice when cruelty becomes too loud." His mouth tightened. He didn't argue because he knew I was right. In the days that followed, the social unraveling began. His colleagues stopped inviting him to after-work dinners. The company's HR department quietly reassigned some of his accounts. Friends we'd had for years stopped returning his calls. At the grocery store, whispers followed us like shadows. Once, a woman from our church approached me, her voice low and sympathetic. "Lena, I just want you to know, we're proud of how strong you've been. You didn't deserve any of this." I thanked her, my throat tight. Later that night, Daniel came home later than usual. I could tell he'd been drinking. He stumbled into the kitchen, half angry, half defeated. You're turning everyone against me, he slurred. You think you're some kind of hero now, huh? The poor betrayed wife who fought back. I put down my tea and looked at him steadily. No, Daniel, I'm just the woman who stopped pretending. He laughed bitterly. Pretending? You think this was easy for me? Easy, I whispered. You humiliated me in my own home. You moved your mistress into our guest house and made me pay her electricity bill. Tell me again what was hard for you. He looked like he wanted to respond, but no words came. For the first time, his silence wasn't power, it was shame. 2 days later, his boss called again. This time, Daniel wasn't at home. Double quotes Mrs. Thompson. The man said carefully, I thought you should know. Daniel has been put on temporary leave pending an internal review. There were expenses on the company account that don't line up. I closed my eyes. I see. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I know it's been difficult. When I hung up, I felt no joy, just a strange, heavy calm. Justice had its own rhythm, and it was finally catching up to him. That evening, he came home early, face pale, movements rigid. They suspended me, he said, voice flat, because of your little crusade. I raised an eyebrow. My crusade didn't touch your company account, Daniel. You did that all on your own. He slammed his fist on the counter. You've ruined everything. I stood my ground. No, Daniel, you did that the moment you chose deceit over decency. He stared at me, breathing hard, and for a moment I thought he might actually apologize, but instead, he turned away, like a man too proud to face the ruins of his own creation. The legal process moved faster than either of us expected. With Marcia's help, the court recognized my claims of financial misuse and emotional distress. The guest house, once his symbol of conquest, was officially declared my property. When the judgment came through, I sat on the porch, reading the letter in silence. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the clouds. He came out quietly. So, that's it, he asked, voice hollow. I folded the papers and met his eyes. That's it. He nodded slowly, then gave a half smile. Not kind, not cruel, just resigned. You really did it, didn't you? I had to, I said softly, because if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life paying for your sins. He looked away, eyes glistening. I never thought you'd actually fight back. I stood, holding the papers tightly in my hand. You never thought I could. Then I walked inside, leaving him on the porch, a man surrounded by silence and the echo of everything he'd lost. That night, I moved into the guest house, not as a symbol of victory, but of reclamation. The same walls that once echoed with betrayal now held peace. I opened the windows, lit a candle, and let the air clear out the past. As I sat on the couch, I whispered quietly to myself, you're free now. For the first time in months, I believed it. But freedom wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It came quietly in steady breaths, in mornings without tension, in nights where sleep finally felt safe. Daniel moved out 2 weeks later. He didn't say goodbye. I didn't need him to. Sometimes I still see his car pass by the neighborhood, slowing near the curb like he's looking for something. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's regret, maybe it's the ghost of the life he destroyed. But I don't look back anymore. When people ask me what I learned, I tell them this: sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is not forgive, not forget, but reclaim. Reclaim her voice, her name, her dignity. Because betrayal doesn't end with heartbreak. It ends when the betrayed finally stops living in someone else's shadow. It's been 8 months since Daniel left. 8 months of rediscovering who I am when I'm not trying to fix someone else's chaos. The guest house, once the stage for my humiliation, is now my sanctuary. I turned it into a small art studio. The walls are lined with my sketches, my paintings, my quiet reflections of a world that kept spinning even after my life stopped. There's peace in routine now. I wake up early, make coffee, open the curtains, and let the morning sun fill the room. I don't check my phone obsessively anymore. I don't wait for footsteps that never come. For the first time, silence feels kind. Sometimes, though, memory has its own cruel timing. A song will play on the radio, or I'll see a couple laughing in a grocery aisle, and a shadow of what once was will cross my heart. But I've learned not to chase it. Not every memory deserves to be healed. Some just need to be respected and released. Marcia calls often, still half in disbelief that I actually followed through with everything. You know, she said one evening over the phone, you handled it better than most people would have. You didn't just survive it, you reclaimed it. I smiled. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. That's rarer, she said softly. And stronger. The town eventually stopped whispering. New scandals came. New faces replaced ours in the rumor mill. But people still greet me kindly. Their smiles genuine now, not pitying. One woman at the farmer's market told me, "You showed a lot of us that dignity can be louder than drama." Her words stayed with me, because for so long, I thought silence meant weakness. But now I understand silence can also be a form of power, especially when it's chosen. A few months ago, Daniel sent me a letter. No return address, no apology, not really. Just a few lines written in his neat mechanical handwriting. "I think about what I lost more often than I should. I hope you're happy now. D." I read it once, then tucked it into a box in the closet, not to hold on, but to remind myself how far I'd come. There's a small patch of garden behind the guest house where I planted lilies, the same kind she used to keep on the table, but these ones are mine now. I take care of them myself. Every bloom feels like a quiet reclaiming of something stolen. People sometimes ask me if I'd ever fall in love again, and maybe, one day, I will. But right now, I'm in love with something else. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't flinch when a car door slams or when the phone rings after midnight. The kind that lets you sleep deeply, knowing that everything left behind was exactly where it needed to stay. One evening, as the sun set and the sky burned gold, I stood outside the guest house, watching the light fade across the yard. The same path Daniel used to walk now led to nothing but soft grass and quiet air. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build, piece by piece, out of pain, strength, and forgiveness of yourself. Because healing isn't about forgetting who hurt you. It's about remembering who you were before they did, and choosing to become that person again, only stronger. So when I look at this little home now, the one that once symbolized betrayal, I don't see what happened there anymore. I see resilience, I see survival, I see me. And that, finally, is enough.